Week 6 of the fantasy baseball season, and here's a few hitters I look to trade and sell this week. The first guy, Luis Robert of the Chicago White Sox. So Robert, he was great last season and half the year played after he missed the first half of the season with an injury. And so far this year, off to a pretty good start. 5 home runs, 13 RBIs, 6 stolen bases, 20 runs scored at 296 batting average and a 331 on base. But the last couple weeks here, he's hitting 352 with a 407 average. So right here, Robert, one of the most highly touted prospects over the last few seasons in the major leagues. And so far this season, a pretty decent start for him. But he's a guy, I just don't know yet what he's going to do in a full season in the major leagues. I know last season he hit 338 in 275 at-bats. But this year so far, he's had peaks and valleys to the season in the first 115 at-bats here for Luis Robert. So the last few games here for him, May 12th, versus the Yankees, 1 for 5 with a run. May 13th versus the Yankees, 2 for 4, 2 runs. May 14th versus the Yankees, 2 for 4, 2 RBIs. May 15th versus the Yankees, 2 for 4. May 16th at the Royals, 2 for 5, a homer, 2 RBIs, 2 runs scored. And then in a doubleheader versus Kansas City yesterday, May 17th, 1 for 8. So right here, he's a guy that definitely has talent. He's definitely a good player, but I just don't know what you're going to get from him. So right now, while he's playing good baseball, I think he's a perfect sell-high guy. And you could get a lot for him because he was a player drafted anywhere from the 3rd or 4th round in most fantasy leagues. And maybe some people want the stolen bases or a guy who's going to score a lot of runs, because with the home runs and stuff, I just don't know exactly what we're going to get from Robert. So right now, while he's playing great, it's a perfect time to sell him off. The next guy is Tommy Edman of the St. Louis Cardinals. So Edman last season, he had 30 stolen bases, but he only hit 262. And this year so far, he's pretty much on the same pace like he was last year. 4 home runs, 18 RBIs, 25 runs scored, 9 stolen bases, a 273 average. But the great thing about him, his on base is just about 100 points higher, a 372 on base. But right here, he's been an up and down player with the batting average and getting on base. Over the last few weeks, he's only hitting 212, but he definitely works the count. He's a good switch hitter that gets on base, and right now he's ranked 14th in fantasy baseball. So right now I think the ranking's a little bit too high, and he's a perfect sell-high candidate. I think this season he'll finish outside the top 50, or maybe even worse, even though I know he's the engine that starts it off for this Cardinal offense. So the last few games here for Edman, May 12th, versus Baltimore, 1 for 4 with a run. May 13th versus San Francisco, 0 for 3 with a run and a stolen base. May 14th versus the Giants, 1 for 4, a homer and RBI. May 15th versus the Giants, 1 for 5 with 2 runs. And May 17th at the Mets in a doubleheader, 2 for 7, a run and RBI, a stolen base. So right here, if you want stolen bases and runs, fine, keep Edman. But right now, it's a lost art in fantasy baseball and obviously in the major leagues. So right here, if you don't really care about those categories, or it's not a big deal to you if you're an Edman owner, this is a perfect time with his high rank and him really being a run and stolen base specialist with a good on base to sell him high this week. The next guy is Josh Bell of the Washington Nationals. I mentioned Bell last week as a sell-high guy, and I'm going to continue to say it. I know Bell made adjustments this offseason to be more of a line drive hitter and not worry about hitting home runs, and so far it's worked out greatly for him, especially being in the middle of the order when Nelson Cruz and Juan Soto over here in Washington. 4 home runs, 22 RBIs, 23 runs scored, a 328 average, and a 418 on base, but I just don't see it keeping it going here for Josh Bell, especially ranked 12th this season in fantasy, and especially a batting average at about 330 and an on base at 418. So right here, the power's down because of the new approach. But another thing here that I'll give credit to Bell, only 17 strikeouts so far in 131 at-bats, so he's really putting the ball in play. His numbers are great, but the last couple weeks here, he's starting to fizzle out with a 265 average with a homer and 4 RBIs in the last 2 weeks and 50 at-bats. So right here, he's starting to come back down to earth. And if I'm a Bell owner, this is a guy I'm looking to sell high. He's a perfect sell-high candidate because going through his career stats and stuff, the numbers just don't add up for him. And right now, the power's down as well with the new approach of the last few games here for Bell. May 12th versus the Mets, 1 for 4. May 13th versus the Astros, 1 for 4. May 14th versus Houston, 1 for 5 with a run. May 15th versus Houston, 1 for 3. May 16th in Miami, 1 for 4. And May 17th in Miami, 0 for 2 with an RBI. So right here, He's getting a hit a game, it seems like, but the power's down, and he's going to start dropping those numbers. So right now, while he's at peak value and peak batting average here is Josh Bell, he's a perfect sell-high candidate, and I think you could get a good starting pitcher for him in a deal this week. The next guy's Colton Wong of the Milwaukee Brewers. So Wong over the last few weeks is where he's really putting up numbers, hitting 300 with a 420 on-base percentage in the last 2 weeks. So in the season, 3 home runs, 12 RBIs, 8 stolen bases, 20 runs scored at 248 average, and a pretty decent on-base to batting average at 326. But like I mentioned, the last few weeks is where Colton Wong's getting things going for fantasy owners. But he's also a guy that's very inconsistent throughout his career. He could have a good month, and then for a month he could hit 150 is Wong. So the last few games here for him: May 11th at the Reds, 2 for 4 with a run. May 13th at Miami, 1 for 4, a homer and RBI. May 15th at the Marlins, 2 for 2, a homer and RBI, 2 stolen bases, 2 runs scored. May 16th versus Atlanta, 0 for 4. And May 17th versus Atlanta, 1 for 4. So right here, while he's hot, is Colton Wong. I would sell him off, and I think you get a decent starter or maybe a closer in a deal for him, because second base isn't the greatest of positions in fantasy baseball. So right here, that's good value to trade him off at second base and get something that your team might need. In the fifth and final hitter I've looked to sell and trade this week here, Xander Bogert of the Boston Red Sox. So it's a contract season here for Bogart, and he's off to a hot start this year. Just the only thing I don't like with him this season, the power's way down. 3 home runs only, 15 RBIs, 2 stolen bases, 20 runs scored, a great 338 batting average, and a 400 on base. So Bogarts, he's hitting the baseball. But the thing is, he's not hitting home runs, like I mentioned. He's not driving in runs, and he's more of a singles hitter. And his stolen bases, he's not going to get many anymore at this stage of his career. Only 5 last season and 2 last year. But last year he drove in 80 runs with 23 homers, and I don't know if he'll reach that mark this year. So right now, while he's batting great though at 338, it's a perfect time to sell him off. He's still a great name. He's still a good ball player, but you want more this season. Even though I know shortstop's a weak position, I think you could sell Bogarts off and get maybe a pitcher and a shortstop in a deal for him. So the last few games here for Bogarts: May 11th at Atlanta, 0 for 3. May 13th at Texas, 2 for 5 with a run, 2 RBIs. May 14th at Texas, 1 for 4 with a rib. May 15th at Texas, 1 for 3 with a stolen base. May 16th versus Houston, 1 for 2 with a homer, 2 RBIs and a run. And May 17th versus Houston, 0 for 3. So right now, he's not doing much for fantasy owners besides batting average and on base, which is a little puzzling to me here. Last year and the year before that, this guy's a 25-30 home run guy. Maybe he could still reach that mark if he has a crazy next 3-4 months of the season here as Bogarts. But right now, while he's only a batting average guy and doing it well at a weak shortstop position in fantasy baseball, I still think you could get great value for him. So that's a few hitters I look to sell and trade here for week 6 of the fantasy baseball season.